Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're tackling something pretty ambitious, I think. It's like we're hopping into a global time machine.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. We're focusing in on one really fascinating period, the world right around the 1st century AD.
Often called the Year Zero period, give or take.
Exactly. And the really cool part, the thing we want to explore, is how you had all these different civilizations developing simultaneously.
But, and this is key, often completely cut off from each other, like operating in their own bubbles.
Totally. So we're moving way beyond just looking at Rome, you know? Our sources let us take this wider global snapshot. We can compare these huge empires running at the exact same time.
So we're going from, say, Han China.
Right. All the way over Rome, naturally. But then also jumping across oceans to the jungles where the Maya were building cities.
Wow.
And even into the Sahara Desert, looking at some incredibly clever societies there.
So our mission, then, for this deep dive,
Yeah.
what are we trying to figure out?
Well, the core idea is what some historians call simultaneous inequality.
Okay.
Think about it. Time is passing at the same speed for everyone on the planet, right? A year is a year, whether you're in Rome or Peru.
Sure. Makes sense.
But the way these societies developed, their technology, their beliefs,
Yeah.
their political setups, they were just radically different, sometimes astonishingly so.
So we're looking for the big players, the superpowers of the time.
Definitely. Rome is obvious, but we'll see. Han China was absolutely its equal in many ways, a kind of mirror image in the East. And we'll dig into these surprising similarities they shared, like how they both obsessed over border security.
The wall thing.
Exactly. But then we also look at cultures that were totally doing their own thing. The Germanic tribes, maybe the Nazca in South America, these desert engineers in Africa.
And they show how humans adapt and innovate in completely unique ways when they're isolated.
Precisely. Sometimes achieving incredible things with, by Roman standards, very basic technology. It really challenges our ideas about what developed means.
All right, this sounds fascinating. Let's dive in. Where do we start? The big one.
Let's start with the undeniable center of gravity in the West at this time, Rome. So, beginning of the 1st century AD. Rome isn't just powerful, it's light. It's a monster of a city, physically enormous.
The biggest in the world at that point.
By far. We're talking a population comfortably over 1 million people.
1 million. It's hard to even picture that density back then.
It really is. And a lot of the credit, or at least the vision, goes to Kaiser Augustus. You know, the famous quote.
The city of brick, left it marble won.
That's the one. And it wasn't just vanity, you know, making things look pretty. It was fundamentally about upgrading the city's infrastructure to handle that massive population.
Making it modern functional.
Exactly. Aqueducts, bringing in water, huge public spaces like forums, even large apartment blocks, the insulae. The marble wasn't just for temples. It showed up in public buildings, pavements. It signaled permanence, investment.
Okay, but 1 million people jammed together.
Yeah.
The sources must talk about the chaos, right? It must have been incredibly loud and busy.
Oh, absolutely. Loud, congested, hectic. Imagine the logistics, getting food in, goods from the port at Ostia, people moving around. It was a constant rush.
So how did they even manage that? Just let it be chaos?
No, they actually came up with a pretty radical solution. Rome was, believe it or not, the first city in history to ban private wagon traffic during the day.
Get out. Seriously. Like an ancient congestion charge zone, but way stricter.
Sort of. It was primarily about keeping the streets clear for pedestrians and, crucially, for official state and military business. All the heavy supply wagons, the deliveries.
Had to happen at night.
Exactly. So the city might have been relatively calmer for people walking around during the day, but nighttime it must have been deafening. Roaring with wagons, workers. It completely reshaped the daily rhythm of life for everyone.
That's incredible social engineering.
Yeah.
But okay, managing traffic is one thing. Managing the people, that brings us to bread and circuses, doesn't it?
It does. The emperors were smart. They knew that keeping the massive population fed and entertained was key to political stability. Keep them happy, keep them distracted, and they'll accept your rule.
And the ultimate stage for that was the Colosseum.
Completed around 80 AD, yeah. It was the pinnacle of imperial spectacle. But the really fascinating part is what was going on underneath.
The backstage stuff.
Exactly. Archaeology has uncovered this amazing network underground, the hypogeum, catacombs, tunnels, holding cells. And get this, 28 separate lifts.
28 lifts. What for?
Operated by complex ropes and pulleys, probably hundreds of slaves working them. They could lift scenery, props, gladiators, and most dramatically, wild animals straight up into the arena through trapdoors.
Wow, so if you were gladiator fighting,
You're already facing a trained opponent, maybe multiple opponents, and you have no idea when or where a lion or a bear or something worse might suddenly appear from the floor.
that's terrifying. Talk about psychological warfare. And they'd feed the crowds, too.
Often, yes. Free bread, entertainment. It kept the masses content and reinforced the emperor's power and generosity. It was a calculated system of control.
This period also seems like a high point for Roman excellence. Extravagance, right?
Yeah.
Especially food.
Absolutely. We see this reflected in the first Roman cookbook that survived, the Apicius, attributed to Marcus Gavius Apicius, a famous gourmand.
And the recipes are pretty wild.
Some of them sound completely bizarre to us. Things like stuffed thrushes, incredibly complex sauces, ingredients sourced from all over the empire, flamingo tongues, apparently.
Flamingo tones, okay, that's definitely showing off the empire's reach. It wasn't just food, it was a status symbol.
Totally. It demonstrated the wealth and the trade networks needed to bring these exotic things to Roman tables. But stepping back from the super elite stuff.
There must have been everyday staples.
Oh, yeah. And the single most defining ingredient, economically and culturally, was garum.
The fermented fish sauce. I've heard of that.
It was everywhere, used like salt or pepper, added to almost everything. And its sheer volume tells us something really important about the Roman economy.
How so? Through what trade records?
Even better, through archaeology. Specifically, a place just outside Rome called Monte Testaccio.
Monte Testaccio. That's the weird hill, right? The one that's not natural?
Exactly. It's a 50-meter-high hill made entirely out of broken pottery shards.
Just trash.
Ancient trash, yes. Specifically, the fragments of millions of amphorae, the disposable clay jars used to transport goods. Estimates are over 25 million amphorae represented there.
25 million. What were they carrying?
Mostly olive oil, wine, and crucially huge amounts of that garum. And here's the kicker. These goods often weren't just traded, they were tribute. Taxes paid in kind by the provinces.
Ah, so the Mountain of Broken Pots is basically a physical record of Roman taxes.
Precisely. You can literally see the economic engine at work. The higher the pile of debris from a certain period, the more oil, wine, and fish sauce was flowing into Rome as tribute from places like Spain or North Africa. Wow.
It's a stark, quantifiable indicator of the empire's power and its ability to extract wealth. They were literally building a monument out of the packaging of their economic dominance.
Okay, so Rome is this huge, complex, economically powerful center in the West. Consuming resources, managing crowds, projecting power. Were they really the only game in town on this scale?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And this is where that global perspective becomes so crucial for understanding the era. If you shift your gaze about 7,000 kilometers east,
You hit China.
you hit Han Dynasty China. And it is, in almost every measurable way, an equal superpower operating at the exact same time.
In size.
Remarkably close. The Han Empire covered over 4 million square kilometers.
Yeah.
Very, very similar to the Roman Empire's maximum extent.
Okay, that's big. What about population? We said Rome had maybe 56 million.
Get this. The Han Dynasty conducted an incredibly detailed census in 2 AD. It's considered one of the most reliable population counts from the ancient world.
And the number.
They recorded exactly, and I mean exactly, 57,671,400 people. Down to the hundreds. That's unbelievable precision for that time.
Isn't it? It implies an extraordinary level of state organization, of bureaucratic capacity, to be able to count nearly 60 million people across such a vast territory.
That suggests a really powerful central government, maybe even more organized than Rome in some respects.
It certainly suggests a different kind of organization, perhaps more centralized and standardized. So you have these two giants separated by thousands of kilometers, probably barely aware of each other's existence, yet operating on an almost identical scale in terms of land and people.
And just like Rome had its massive capital, China had.
Chong'an, the Han capital. Now, it was a bit smaller than Rome, maybe 250,000 inhabitants.
Still huge for the time.
Absolutely huge. And the descriptions we have suggest a similar kind of urban experience, the hustle, the bustle, the noise, the traffic. A Roman citizen dropped into Chong'an might have actually found the sheer energy of the place quite familiar.
Even without any direct contact.
Even without contact. It seems the experience of living in a massive pre-industrial metropolis had its own universal characteristics. And just like Rome needed a system to manage its empire.
The Han needed one too. A bureaucracy.
A massive one. To govern this vast empire, the Han emperors relied on an enormous administrative apparatus. We're talking something like 130,000 salaried state officials.
130,000? What were they all doing?
They were the emperor's eyes, ears, and hands across the provinces, collecting taxes, which is how we get that amazing census number, administering justice, overseeing infrastructure projects like canals and roads, managing state monopolies on things like salt and iron.
And managing expansion, presumably.
Critically, they were the engine driving Han expansion, particularly westward, pushing along the routes that were becoming the Silk Road deep into Central Asia.
So, a very structured, centrally controlled system compared to Rom's, which often used local elites more.
That's a fair characterization, yes. The Han system emphasized standardized training and recruitment for its officials. It was all about projecting the emperor's power consistently across the realm.
So 2 superpowers, immense scale, complex bureaucracies, constant expansion. It sounds like they were bound to run into similar problems eventually.
They absolutely were, and one problem in particular became an obsession for both. As these huge empires pushed outwards, they inevitably reached a point where, where they couldn't easily push any further. They became almost too big to effectively control their own borders.
Victims of their own success, in a way.
Exactly. And for Han China, the major challenge, the constant threat on their northwestern frontier, came from a group called the Xiongnu.
The Xiongnu.
Nomadic people.
A powerful confederation of nomadic tribes, yeah. Masters of the steppe. Now, the Han officials, in their writings, tended to dismiss them. They called them cultureless barbarians.
Why? Because they were nomads. Partly. The Han sources mock them for not having writing or cities or a complex bureaucracy like their own. They even mention them using sheep bones for fortune-telling, seeing it as primitive.
But was that dismissal accurate? Were the Xiongnu really just disorganized raiders?
Not at all. That was a huge underestimation, a major strategic mistake by the Han. The Xiongnu were a sophisticated and powerful steppe empire in their own right, highly mobile, brilliant horsemen.
And their raids weren't random.
Far from it. They were often highly organized, almost predictable. They'd frequently strike in the autumn, right after the Chinese harvest was in.
Hitting them where it hurts. Stealing the food supply.
Precisely. It wasn't just about plunder. These raids destabilized the border regions, threatened food security, and ultimately challenged the Han Emperor's mandate of heaven, his legitimacy to rule. It was an existential threat.
So the Han needed a solution. A big one, presumably.
A monumental one. This is where the origins of what we now call the Great Wall really take shape. While later dynasties added huge sections, a massive part of the fortification system, especially in the northwest against the Xiongnu, was already being built or consolidated during this Han period, around the 1st century AD.
Building a wall across that kind of terrain, the scale is just mind-boggling.
It truly is. Han engineers actually calculated things like labor requirements. They figured 100,000 workers could build about 1 kilometer of wall per month using packed earth, sand, reeds, stones, whatever was available locally.
100,000 workers for a kilometer a month. And the final wall system stretched for thousands of kilometers.
Eventually, across different dynasties, almost 22,000 kilometers, It's staggering.
How do we know what life was like for the poor souls actually building and guarding this thing?
We actually have incredible evidence. In 1907, British explorers along the Silk Road route found not just remnants of the Han-era walls, but also thousands of wooden slips, basically letters and documents preserved in the dry desert climate.
Wow, actual messages from 2,000 years ago.
Yeah. They confirm the wall was primarily against the Xiongnu, and they give us this raw, unfiltered glimpse into the lives of the border guards.
What do they say? Was it all strategy and reports?
Some of it was official, but a lot was personal. Guys writing home, complaining about being stuck out there for 355 days a year. Ouch. Complaining about the brutal weather, freezing winters, scorching summers, terrible food, constant boredom punctuated by sheer terror, and just being desperately homesick. Many were waiting for transfers that never came, living in constant fear of the Xiongnu cavalry suddenly appearing over the horizon.
It sounds miserable. A huge state project built on the backs of isolated, scared soldiers.
Pretty much. And here's where the parallel is just uncanny. Travel 7,000 kilometers west.
And you find the Romans dealing with the exact same issue.
The exact same fundamental problem. A massive, wealthy empire that had grown so large it couldn't effectively secure its incredibly long borders against what they also saw as barbarians, mobile, unpredictable groups on their periphery.
And Rome's answer was the limes.
The limes, yes. Construction also ramps up significantly in the 1st century AD. Same fundamental purpose. Secure the frontier, control movement, keep troublesome neighbors out.
But the limes wasn't quite the same as the Great Wall, was it? Less of a single, solid barrier.
Generally, no. It was more of a system. It included sections of wall, sure, but also ditches, earth banks, wooden palisades, and crucially, a whole network of watchtowers and forts garrisoned with troops.
So more about surveillance and rapid response than just building an impassable barrier.
That seems to be the Roman approach, yeah. Projecting power, controlling crossing points, being able to react quickly, whereas the Han seemed more focused on creating a massive, continuous physical separation. Different methods, same underlying problem.
And did people inside these empires question these massive defense projects? Did they think they were worth the cost?
Absolutely. In both empires, you find evidence of doubt. When the Xiongnu or the Germanic tribes inevitably found ways through or around the defenses because no wall is ever perfect, people started asking questions.
Like, we're spending all this money and manpower and my farm still got raided.
Exactly. Is this colossal effort actually making us safer, or is it just a huge drain on resources? That anxiety, that debate over the cost and effectiveness of border defense. It was a shared burden of being a superpower in the year zero world.
Okay, so Rome is pouring resources into defending its borders. Let's look at who they were defending against. In the north, you mentioned the Germanic tribes. How different were they from, say, the Xiongnu facing China?
Well, like the Xiongnu, the Germanic tribes didn't leave their own written records from this period, so almost everything we know comes through Roman eyes, especially the historian Tacitus.
And Tacitus had his own agenda, right? Praising German virtue to criticize Roman decadence.
Definitely. He paints this picture of them loving freedom, having these fierce, respected priestesses, and worshiping in sacred natural groves rather than temples.
That's a key difference right there. The Romans built grand temples. The Germans used forests.
Tacitus specifically says they thought it was beneath the majesty of their gods to enclose them within walls. And archaeology backs this up. Sites like Niederdorla in Germany show these open-air cult spots full of sacrificed animal bones, suggesting worship focused on natural settings.
So religiously quite different. What about politically? Did they have kings or emperors like Rome or China?
Not really, no. They lacked that kind of centralized state structure. No big bureaucracy, no legions of officials. Power seems to have been more decentralized, maybe held by tribal chiefs, but also significantly by those priests who controlled the sacred sites.
So not a unified political entity, just separate tribes.
Largely, yes.
Yeah.
They might occasionally gather at central holy places. Tacitus mentions honoring a mythical ancestor called Manus, but it seems more like a shared cultural or religious identity than a unified political state. They were often fighting amongst themselves.
Which makes the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest in 9 AD even more remarkable. How did they manage to unite and defeat Roman legions?
Teutoburg Forest. A disaster for Rome. It seems the Roman general, Varus, made a catastrophic mistake, maybe arrogance, maybe ignorance, but he marched 3 legions, we're talking maybe 20,000 heavily armed professional soldiers, right into or near one of these sacred Germanic groves.
A huge taboo. He basically desecrated their holy ground.
Exactly. And the Germanic leader, Arminius, who actually had Roman citizenship and knew Roman tactics, exploited this brilliantly. This sacrilege was the one thing that could unite the normally fractious tribes.
Appealing to religious outrage, not just politics.
Yes. They rallied under the banner of their war god, Woden, caught the legions on unfavorable marshy ground where their heavy armor was a disadvantage, and absolutely annihilated them. It basically stopped Roman expansion east of the Rhine permanently, a victory driven by cultural and religious identity against a superpower.
Okay, so that's the northern frontier. Now let's pivot south. You mentioned Judea earlier.
Yeah.
How different was that conflict for Rome?
Totally different dynamic. Go about 4,000 kilometers south of Germania to Jerusalem. Here, Rome wasn't dealing with tribal groups and forests. It was dealing with an ancient, literate culture with a deeply ingrained monotheistic religion and a history of independence.
And Rome had a lot more invested there. Presumably, it was a wealthier, more strategic province.
Much more. And the relationship was complex. Archaeology actually shows us something interesting under places like the Church of the Redeemer in Jerusalem.
What's that?
Evidence of wealthy Jewish residents embracing Roman lifestyles, building beautiful villas with Roman-style frescoes and comforts like you'd find in Pompeii. There was an element that wanted Jerusalem to be a thriving center within the Roman world, not just a restive province.
So it was a mix of assimilation and resistance.
Precisely. And into this tense mix comes the figure of Jesus of Nazareth. His message focusing on unconditional love, challenging established hierarchies, was deeply provocative.
Provocative to whom? Just the Romans?
To both sides, really. He challenged the authority and practices of the elite Jewish temple priests, But the Romans also saw him as a potential troublemaker, someone stirring up the populace, which, as we know, ultimately led to his execution.
But his death wasn't the end of the story, obviously.
Far from it. The movement he started, Christianity, eventually broke away from its Jewish origins. And ironically, it spread like wildfire, using the very infrastructure Rome provided, the safe roads, the trade routes, the common languages across the Mediterranean.
But the core conflict between Rome and the Jewish population didn't go away. It led to the Great Revolt.
In 66 AD, yes, a full-scale rebellion. Many Jews were absolutely convinced that this was the moment that their God would finally intervene, perhaps send a Messiah to overthrow Roman rule.
But that didn't happen.
It didn't. The Roman military response was brutal and effective. The climax came in 70 AD with the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, the absolute heart of Jewish religious life. And from the perspective of the rebels waiting for divine intervention, well, nothing happened. The Romans won.
That must have been a shattering theological crisis.
Devastating. Yet, even during the uprising, their defiance and belief were incredible. Archaeologists find Roman coins from that period that the rebels actually restamped.
Restamped? With what?
With Jewish symbols, a vine leaf, a temple vessel, and inscriptions like year 2 of the struggle or just freedom. They were literally overwriting the symbols of Roman power with their own, asserting their conviction that they would prevail.
Wow. That's powerful symbolism.
Yeah.
So what was the fundamental issue for Rome with both Judaism and early Christianity compared to, say, the Germanic beliefs?
The core problem from the Roman perspective was monotheism.
Believing in only one God.
Yes. The Roman system was polytheistic. They had a whole pantheon of gods. They could absorb new gods from conquered peoples. And crucially, the emperor himself had a divine or semi-divine status which justified his rule.
And monotheism rejected all of that.
Completely. Believing in one exclusive, all-powerful God inherently challenged the Roman religious and political order. It didn't fit. You couldn't just add the Jewish God or the Christian God to the pantheon. Their followers refused to acknowledge other gods, including the divinity of the emperor. That made them deeply suspect, politically dangerous in Roman eyes.
We've covered the Eurasian superpowers and their conflicts, but you mentioned earlier these totally isolated civilizations. Let's jump across the Atlantic. We're talking, what, 12,000 kilometers from Rome?
Roughly, yeah. And here, in the Americas, you find cultures developing on entirely separate trajectories. Europe, Asia, Africa, they had no idea these places even existed.
And the concept of simultaneous inequality becomes really clear here, especially technologically.
Absolutely stark. Think about it. While Han China is inventing things like the wheelbarrow and Rome is using copper pipes and advanced engineering, you have the Maya in Mesoamerica.
Building those incredible pyramids in cities we still marvel at.
Exactly. Building pyramids reaching 70 meters high, developing complex cities like Tikal, which really starts booming around the end of the 1st century AD.
But how are they building them?
This is the key difference.
Yeah.
They were doing it essentially with Stone Age technology. They didn't have metal tools for quarrying or carving in the way the old world did. They didn't have the wheel for transport. They didn't have draft animals like oxen or horses.
No horses, no metal tools. Building 70-meter pyramids, how is that even possible?
Pure human muscle power, organization, and incredible knowledge of mathematics and engineering, using the materials they had, primarily stone and wood. By European standards of the time, it was a Stone Age society, technologically speaking.
Yet, architecturally and intellectually, they were achieving things that rivaled anyone.
Precisely. And their location choices are also fascinating. Building these huge cities deep in the tropical rainforest of the Yucatan Peninsula.
That seems like asking for trouble. Humidity, disease, difficult farming.
It posed immense challenges, and it contributes to the mystery of why their civilization eventually declined centuries later. But their motivation seems to have been overwhelmingly spiritual.
How do we see that?
Look at sites like El Mirador. Archaeologists found this absolutely gigantic stucco mask, a face of a king or deity, built right into the earthworks of a pyramid base.
A huge face looking upwards.
Yes, gazing straight up at the heavens, as if establishing direct contact with the gods. And features are often exaggerated, like a disproportionately large nose.
What would that signify?
It likely represents divine lineage, maybe connection to a powerful ancestor or embodying a specific god. Power and status weren't just about earthly control. They were about your connection to the cosmos, to the divine.
And they were also incredible astronomers, right?
Astonishingly good. El Mirador, Tikal, many other sites were clearly designed as astronomical observatories. The alignment of temples and buildings was precise, used for tracking the sun, moon, planets, stars.
Their calendar.
They had calculated the length of the solar year with incredible accuracy, almost perfectly, even back around the time of Jesus. All this massive effort, the building, the mathematics, the astronomy, it seems primarily directed towards understanding the cosmos, appeasing the gods, predicting cycles, not necessarily towards conquest or trade in the Roman or Han sense.
A completely different focus. What about South America? The Nazca.
Moving down to the high plains of southern Peru, you find the Nazca culture, famous for the Nazca lines.
Those giant drawings in the desert that you can only really see from the air. The monkey, the hummingbird.
Those are the ones. Huge geoglyphs drawings made on the land depicting animals, plants, geometric shapes, some stretching for kilometers.
Now, how do they even make them? And why? Alien theories aside.
Haha, yeah, let's stick to the archaeology. Technically, it was simple but laborious. They just removed the dark, oxidized desert pebbles and rocks from the surface to expose the lighter-colored earth underneath.
Okay, simple technique, but the scale. The coordination needed must have been immense. Why bother?
The why seems linked to crisis. Archaeological and climate data suggest the region used to be wetter, more fertile before the lines were made. Then, a period of severe, prolonged drought hit.
An existential threat, like the ones we saw driving spiritual responses elsewhere.
Exactly. The current thinking is that the Nazca lines weren't just art. They were a form of desperate ritual, a massive, sacred landscape. The lines themselves might have been procession paths, used for ceremonies appealing to the gods for water, for survival.
So these giant figures were like emergency calls etched into the earth.
That's a powerful way to think about it. A whole culture pouring its energy into this massive spiritual undertaking because, faced with climate collapse, faith and ritual were perhaps the only tools they felt they had left.
Okay, let's shift continents again, to Africa. We often think of the Sahara as just empty desert, but were there significant cultures there around the year zero?
Absolutely. And again, showing incredible adaptation. Take the Garamantes, who lived in the Fezzan region of what's now Libya, a huge swath of the Sahara, almost twice the size of Germany.
Living in the deep desert, how do they manage water?
They were masters of water management, truly ingenious. They developed this incredible system of underground water channels called foggara. Similar systems exist elsewhere, but the Garamantes perfected it.
Underground channels, like tunnels.
Exactly. They dug over 600 of these channels, sometimes tens of kilometers long, tapping into ancient fossil water deep beneath the desert. The entire network stretched for hundreds of kilometers.
That's incredible engineering. What did that allow them to do?
It allowed them to build one of the first truly urban civilizations in a hyper-arid desert environment. Their capital, Jerma, probably had over 10,000 people. It had distinct residential areas, marketplaces, even Roman-style baths.
Baths in the Sahara,
Yes.
using this underground water.
Yes. They even dug deep vertical shafts, sometimes 40 meters down, to maintain these channels over centuries. This reliable water supply meant they could grow crops you wouldn't expect in a desert: wheat, barley, figs, grapes, even cotton.
So they basically engineered their way around the desert's limitations. A totally different kind of technological achievement.
A testament to specialized adaptation, completely independent of Rome or China. Now, move further south, down the Nile into modern Sudan.
We reached the Kingdom of Kush.
Right, centered around its capital, Meroe. Around the turn of the millennium, the 1st century AD, Meroe was hitting a real cultural and economic peak.
Is this related to ancient Egypt? I know Kush had pharaohs at one point.
It has deep connections, yes. Kush conquered Egypt centuries earlier, forming the 25th dynasty, the Black Pharaohs. By this period, they were independent again, south of Roman Egypt, and thriving. Meroe itself has the largest concentration of pyramids in the world.
More pyramids than Egypt.
More in number, yes, though they're generally smaller and steeper than the famous ones at Giza and built much later. But the sheer quantity speaks to the wealth and power of the Kushite rulers. Excavations have found stunning gold artifacts, intricate jewelry, evidence of extensive ironworking.
So a wealthy kingdom on Rome's southern border. Did Rome try to conquer them?
They did. After Rome annexed Egypt, they pushed south into Nubia, which was Kushite territory, around 23 BC.
And how did that go for the legions?
Not as planned. They were met by a fierce Kushite army, famously led, according to some accounts, by a warrior queen, the Kandak.
A queen leading the army against Rome.
That's the tradition. And they fought effectively. While the Romans won some initial battles and looted a bit, the Kushites counterattacked successfully. Rome eventually decided conquest wasn't worth the cost.
So Kush managed to stop Rome.
They did. They forced Rome to negotiate a peace treaty and withdraw. Like the Germanic tribes in Teutoburg Forest, the Kingdom of Kush stands out as one of the few cultures that successfully resisted Roman military expansion and maintained its independence during this period.
Okay, so Rome couldn't conquer everyone. Germania stopped them, Kush stopped them. But Rome had other ways of exerting influence, right? You mentioned their economic power.
Exactly. This is Rome's plan B, and maybe in the long run, even more effective than conquest. Where military might failed or proved too costly, Rome used its economic weight.
How did that work with groups like Kush or the Garamantes in the desert?
Rome realized they didn't need to rule the Sahara to profit from the trade that crossed it. They needed reliable partners. So they made peace treaties with Kush, established trade relations with the Garamantes.
Letting the locals handle the difficult job of moving goods across the desert.
Precisely. Rome became the ultimate customer, the biggest market. They relied on these indigenous groups who knew the terrain and had the specialized skills like the Garamantes' water tech or Kush's trade networks to bring valuable goods, gold, ivory, exotic animals, slaves north to the Mediterranean ports.
So economic influence instead of direct rule. Control through trade.
That became the strategy. Rome perfected being the dominant economic power. They sought to shape and profit from trade routes even outside their formal imperial borders.
And a prime example of this is Petra, the Nabatean kingdom.
Petra is a perfect case study. This incredible city carved into the rock, capital of the Nabateans. They controlled a really lucrative trade route running between the Red Sea and Syria.
What was so valuable on that route?
Incense. Frankincense and myrrh, primarily. Hugely valuable commodities in the ancient world, used in religious ceremonies, perfumes, medicine. The Nabateans basically had a monopoly on this trade.
And Rome wanted in on that action. Did they conquer Petra?
They eventually did, but later on. Around the year 0, Rome took a different approach. Conquering that harsh desert kingdom would have been difficult and expensive.
So plan B again.
Plan B. Rome essentially acted as Petra's protectorate. They guaranteed Nabatean independence, ensuring stability along the trade route. In return, Rome benefited hugely through taxes and tariffs on the incense trade without the costs of direct occupation.
A win-win, sort of. Petra stays rich and independent for a while. Rome gets rich off their trade.
For a time, yes. And the Nabateans certainly flaunted their wealth. That's why they could carve those magnificent tombs and structures like the famous treasury building right into the cliffs around 40 AD.
But you mentioned even more extreme luxury, something up on a mountain.
Ah, yes, Albiara. It's a high, flat-topped mountain overlooking Petra. Excavations up there suggest a royal palace dating to around this time.
A palace on a mountaintop. Why there? The views.
The views, definitely. But more importantly, visibility from below. They wanted everyone down in Petra to see the palace, to see the king's power and wealth elevated above them.
Okay, location is status. What made it so luxurious?
Get this. They built aqueducts to bring water all the way up the mountain. And the palace had not one, but 2 luxury bath complexes, a private one and a communal one.
Baths on a mountaintop in the desert. That's excessive.
It's beyond excessive. Think about the logistics. Hauling all the building materials up there is one thing. But the water? Okay, aqueducts. But what about heating the baths?
You'd need firewood. Lots of it.
Exactly. They had to haul massive quantities of firewood up this steep, difficult mountain just so the elite could have a hot bath. It's pure, unadulterated, conspicuous consumption. It's not about comfort. It's about demonstrating such absurd wealth and power that you can command that kind of labor for something so non-essential. That's the power the incense trade gave them under Rome's watchful eye. #Hercaro, synthesis and provocation.
Wow. Okay, so we've really swung around the globe here, all roughly within the 1st century AD, from Rome to China, Germania to Judea, the Americas, Africa.
It's quite a trip, and the constant theme is that while time ticked by at the same rate everywhere, the human experience, the paths of development were just incredibly diverse.
That simultaneous inequality you mentioned at the start.
Exactly. See these huge contrasts.
Yeah.
Technology, Rome's complex engineering versus the Maya building pyramids with essentially stone tools. Politics. Massive centralized empires like Han China versus the decentralized tribes of Germania. Religion, emerging monotheism challenging Roman polytheism versus the nature-focused worship in the north, or the cosmocentric beliefs of the Maya.
And yet, despite the vast distances, some problems were universal for the big players.
That's the other striking thing. Rome and Han China, 7,000 kilometers apart, were grappling with the exact same headache. How do you secure immense borders against mobile, determined neighbors? leading both to invest fortunes in walls and armies.
It really highlights these enduring challenges of civilization, doesn't it? Centralized power versus the periphery, managing resources, trade versus conquest.
And underpinning so much of it, this deep human need to understand our place in the universe, to connect with something bigger than ourselves, whether it's through the Maya's precise calendar, the Nazca's desperate lines in the sand, or the Judeans' fervent belief in divine intervention against impossible odds.
The world around Year Zero really does offer these timeless lessons about power, belief, adaptation, and crisis.
Absolutely. Which leads us, as always, to a final thought for you, our listeners, to maybe chew on.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've seen these two colossal empires, Rome and Han China, pour unbelievable resources, manpower, and wealth into building physical barriers, the limes, the Great Wall system, and maintaining huge border armies. We've also seen that these measures faced constant challenges, internal dissent about their cost, and ultimately couldn't permanently secure those vast frontiers against determined groups.
Right. The walls were never a perfect solution.
So the provocative question is this. Reflecting on that immense ancient effort and its limitations, does history actually suggest that any massive, rigid physical barrier can ever truly solve the fundamental geopolitical challenge of managing the relationship between a core power and its periphery, especially when dealing with the movement of peoples and ideas?
Are walls ever the real answer? Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about.